Welcome back, folks, to the Mailwright Show. Yes, it's me, Jonathan Denwood, the founder of Mailwright. Robert is with us, but I'm doing the intro for this particular show, folks, because I'm going to be interviewing Robert and finding all the secrets that Robert's been trying to hide. It's linked to the interrogation that I got last week, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to get my own back. And we need to know more about this character that you've been listening to for over 2 years now. So, Robert, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the audience, Robert?
Sure. This audience probably knows me best for being an SEO expert and an inbound marketing expert that's focused on residential real estate for the last 16 years. I publish a lot of content on YouTube and my website that helps realtors become masters of the digital space and create leads for themselves.
Thanks for that, Robert. And
Sure.
I'm the co-founder of Mailwright. We build websites for real estate agents, semi or full custom, based on WordPress. That drives now almost 45% of all websites. You need to own your main digital asset and not lease it. And that asset is your website. I think a concept that most of you agents will understand. If that sounds interesting, plus a suite of other marketing tools that we bundle with your website, go to the Mailwright website and sign a demo and a chat with me. Truly, I'll be privileged to help you out. So, Robert.
Yeah.
Interrogation time. No, it's linked to our discussion about what should be on your About Us page last week. So, Robert, people that have been listening to the podcast, as you said, your start of your professional career was around telemarketing and managing large telemarketing teams and centers. So maybe we'll start there. I think like last week you said that your childhood, that your parents were kind of semi-hippies. Maybe give a brief outline what your childhood was like, and maybe before you got into telemarketing, and then we'll delve into that. How does that sound, Robert?
Sounds great.
So give us a brief, well, reasonably brief description of what your childhood was like before you got into telemarketing.
So I was raised in Southern California. We bounced around a lot. I was born in Hoag Hospital in Orange County. And then my parents moved probably, I want to say 6 times between the ages of 3 and 11. Santa Monica, Thousand Oaks, Culver City, just to name a few. So we bounced around a lot. My parents were on the hippie-ish side. They were definitely part of the free love culture, and they were fuzzy logic people. And for those who are listening who may not know that terminology, they were on the cusp of, they were both in technology, but they were both in technology 30 years ago. So they were dealing with huge 8mm tapes. My dad helped write some of the original code for the day and night tellers for First Interstate, which most of the people listening to the show probably don't even remember who those people are anymore. So I was raised in that environment. And one of the most interesting things that I've said in other places that has impacted my entire life, my career, everything, is that they didn't allow media in the house, no TV. They were really religious about it up until the time I was about 14 or 15. And the only thing that they made easily accessible to me is a personal library that they created. So mostly by the time I was 11 years old, I was reading at a collegiate level, and I was reading Heinlein and a lot of deep sci-fi, and they had all sorts of books that I don't think you would normally give to children, like The Joy of Sex and The Bastard, which is a really like almost adult like series, and just all sorts of stuff. But with this copious amount of reading that I was doing, it did 2 things for me that have impacted my entire career. When I hit a challenge in my career or my professional life, I seek books. And when I was young and I had problems in my personal life, like high school problems, which we all had, I read books. And the ideas that I was getting were from very advanced authors. Like I was reading like really deep psychological stuff, Freud and Jung, by the time I was 12, 13. So, somebody's like, I'm going to hit you. And I'm like, you've got a problem with your id. So like this, that it's impacted my entire life. Unfortunately, it made me an outcast in my early years. I had very few friends in school. So that certainly kind of set me on the path of always kind of walking my own road and doing things the way that I was going to do them, because I had zero social support and zero social relatability from anybody that I was surrounded with.
Right. So how did both your parents work? And if they did, you said they were both in the tech sector. How did they make their living, basically?
Well, my dad started off managing data backup stacks at night. And then he found somebody that was willing to mentor him and trade him into coding. So he started coding. And eventually he was coding in COBOL. And then he eventually moved into management relatively fast. Before I was even out of the house, which was the age of 17, he was already moving into management, which is where he spent the whole latter half of his career, is getting into higher and higher and higher end project management in what we would call the digital space now. But at the time, it was just coding. So that's what he did. My mother passed when I was 17, but before she passed, she was doing the same thing that my dad did, but she was always on the management side. My mother was always better with people than my dad was. She was a huge personality and people automatically gravitated to her. And before, she was already working every single time she would work someplace, she would just instantly start getting, well, not instantly, but she'd get promoted into management slots pretty quickly, I think.
So fundamentally, they were in tech, but also in the alternative lifestyle kind of area of the Bay Area.
Not the Bay. We were always here in LA, which means that they were both working for a lot of banks. Banking is big here in Los Angeles, and at a certain time, not so much anymore, but at that time, you're talking 30, 40 years ago, banking was kind of leading, or at least matching the lead for information technology revolutions. They were trying to process payments, and they were doing stuff with check encoding and MICR encoding and all those different things. And so at the time, it was a fairly revolutionary industry.
Yeah. So have you got any brothers and sisters?
I have a single brother, stepbrother technically. My father remarried and had a child when I was 22. So I have a brother that is separated by me in age for 22, and we were raised entirely differently. So my dad learned all the lessons from me, like what to do, what not to do. He and my mother were so young when they had me. They were out partying a lot when I was a kid. So, they were 20. I think I was 7, and they were 25 when they got married, and I was 7. Like that, I was really, really young parents. So anyway, my brother, I have one brother.
All right. That's great. And I think he does he help in the business at all? I think he does a bit, doesn't he?
He did, actually, up until recently. I don't think I've had a chance to update you. He actually got himself a job at a major white labeling SEO agency, and took a significant pay increase that InboundREM couldn't afford to give him. But yeah, my brother worked for me for 3.5 years. And I mentored him on the SEO skill set, and he's now taking those tools and applying them out in the big bad world on major accounts.
Oh, that's great. So you said you were a bit of an outsider at school. Also, you've been quite open about some of your addiction problems that have been part of your life in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So did those, before you got into telephone marketing and telephone marketing centers, did that addiction rear itself before that, or was it after a period of time you got involved in that industry?
I don't do anything normal, John. No, actually, addiction for me only came into play. So I have my actual blood family. My dad's my adopted father. So my actual blood family has a very strong addictive history, and I ignored that. But it really didn't come up. I was not much of a drinker or drug user. I had been raised around it so much that whole idea kind of turned me off.
Mm-hmm.
So because that's what my parents were doing. It was the culture at the time. There's just all sorts of, marijuana wasn't as hip as it is now. So I was already being raised around that. I had no interest in doing it. So I was actually a real clean cut.
Right.
It's like 18 through 28. My addiction problem,
which isn't unusual for people that have been brought up in that. To my understanding, in that culture, they tend to be a little bit anti it to some extent.
Yeah. So what happened for me is that I actually got divorced from my first wife, and then that was when my drinking problem started. Almost right after the fact.
So it was around dealing with stress and depression, was it?
Looking back on it, yes, you could say it was a type of depression. I made choices that I didn't think I would ever make. It was never one of those people that said, oh, I'm going to get married and I'm going to get divorced. I was always one of those people that said, if I'm going to get married, because it was never a goal of mine, if I'm going to get married, it's going to be once and done. So when I opted to step away from that relationship, I broke my own heart quite significantly, and it took me 7 years and a lot of self-punishment for me to come to the understanding that basically I was dealing with a broken heart that I had caused. So, and in the meantime, I turned into a total a wreck of a human. Many run-ins with the law over drugs and alcohol, warrants in different places, trips to jail. Never doing the programs that were assigned to me by the state or the city or whatever it was, just always getting myself in trouble, lost businesses, lost relationships, just all the stories that you hear that relate to addiction can definitely be applied to me.
So if you don't mind me asking, what was the turning point that turned that around? What was anything you identified, any individual moment, insight, whatever it might be, that made you decide that maybe another path would be a slightly better choice?
Well, it was in the program they call these God shots, but I definitely had a really dramatic one. I was in a shelter, and I had managed to drink myself into homelessness, and I was in a shelter down in Long Beach, and I had no money, so I wasn't drinking, and I never could quite get myself around panhandling or stealing. So that wasn't the kind of alcoholic or that I was. But I was sitting here in the shelter, and I had every intention of getting a job, getting some money, and just going straight back to partying. That was my whole objective when I was in this shelter. And there was a guy in this bed next to me. They closed the doors and make everybody go to bed, and it's like a shared dorm room kind of experience, like a bunker, kind of like a military, whatever the barracks. There we go. It's like a military barracks with everybody set just literally just a few feet away from each other. And this old guy who was a real sweet guy, he seemed to be struggling with his breathing at night, and I slept next to him before, and this particular time I hear this breathing, then I hear this big rattle, and then nothing. So I actually reached over and kind of put my hand on his neck after whispering, hey, you okay? You okay? Because we're not supposed to talk or move after lights go out, and they'll kick you out of the shelter if you do that. He was dead. The guy was dead. And the weird thing is that, I mean, he was sweet. He wasn't one of those like dangerous addicts. He was just one of those self-destructive addicts. And I just had this moment of clarity, man. Like I looked at him and realized, like, in my head, you go to this place where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy did to himself. And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm in the same shelter in the bed next to him. How can I possibly, like, there for the grace of God go I? Like, I literally had that moment where I said, if I don't make some internal decisions that are dramatic, I am going to be this guy, whether it's tomorrow or 15 or 20 years from now. This is me for sure. I just had this sudden sense of certainty, like a bolt of lightning hit me right through the head. And that's when I actually made the first. I tried to give up drinking like 50 times prior, but not with like a high degree of certainty that, oh, if I don't do this, I will die. Like, and that's what happened for me in that moment. Like I just said, if I don't change, this is me.
That's great. I think we're going to go for our break. When we come back, we'll be discussing Robert's journey, professional journey, from call center wizard and manager to SEO expert. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. We're having a bit of dive with my co-host for the past couple of years, Robert Newman of InboundREM. So we did a bit of a jump because I think you've been open about your addiction and your recovery from it. So obviously, we jumped a little bit. So from being brought up by your parents, you then got into call centers. What were some of the lessons that you learnt from being involved in that industry? On reflection, what are some of the key things you learned around people management and marketing in general, Robert?
So many. I learned how to be how to take being an introvert and deal with people, manage people. I had all of my brutal lessons about people management and all at a very young age. I was already running or helping run like small call centers when I was 19. And so they're the same things they are today. Usually you have people at the lower end of the societal spectrum. Oftentimes they're dealing with mental, emotional, addiction problems. The people that do call center work are usually not. It's like, let's put it this way. You're not going to find somebody with an MA in some kind of tech that came out of fucking Oxford or something like that. You're going to find people that are high school dropouts who are struggling, who took this job as a last option. And that kind of means that they're going to give you, that they insist that you deal with them at a human respect-based level. It's a very interesting career path to choose. And I got really brutalized. Like I remember once I said the word folks in the middle of a meeting of about 30 people. And one of the black ladies at the meeting literally stood me out in the hallway and for 20 minutes told me exactly how racist I had just sounded. And I'm raised by hippies who loved everybody. We had gay friends, we had black friends, we had everybody in my house. There was never any exclusionary. And so I was just like, I'm 19 and I'm getting dressed down by like a 40, 50-year-old black lady. And I'm just like, I was just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to offend you. So it really taught me a lot of things about human beings. And the other thing that it taught me, which is what plays in today's career, interestingly enough, telemarketing done well. My mentor, Billy Halberstadt, who was my first mentor at the age 20, he was the first person that introduced me to spreadsheets and the concept of calculating how many calls everybody was making, what our close percentage was. So from a very early on, and he was the most effective. We were working for a little alarm distributor that was working for AT&T, and we were blowing the doors off Southern California. We were beating everybody, and Billy was running all of the appointment setting, the outbound telemarketing for them. And I was assisting Billy, and he was teaching me why he was so effective, because he would look at scripts and he would look at changes in those scripts, and then he would look at our numbers, and then he would say, did this change here? He also taught me about tonality, which is one of the first times I ever started to realize how deeply it's not what we say sometimes, but it's how we say it. And so all of those elements, and the list keeps going on and on and on. Like there's so many things that you don't like mirroring, as an example, mirroring behavior over the phone, which is also something that Billy told me. I got super lucky. My first mentor was a studious guy who had read all the available books. He introduced me to Tom Hopkins, which goes back to what I already shared with you. He gave me some books to read as my mentor, and I dug deep into those things. And so I started applying professional sales tactics in telemarketing as well, and then teaching professional sales tactics, because most of the people in the call center were just reading from scripts. They had never learned any professional sales tactics like alternative choice closes, or assumed closes, or trial closes, and the list goes on and on and on. And all these things that professional sales trainers will teach you really weren't being used in call centers. So I made a career out of that. Like, I made a career out of what Billy taught me, tracking statistics, which, believe it or not, we didn't have. It wasn't digital. So Billy was way ahead of his time. And so I used that whole methodology of figuring out how to track things. You know how we used to track things, John? You'll love this. You know how we used to track calls?
I have no idea how you did it.
Tick marks on a piece of paper. Every time somebody made a call, we had them make like a little, I don't have a clean piece of paper, but we had them make a little just tick mark. And then we just have them do 5. So we would literally have them track their own calls by tick marks, because this is way prior to digital. There was no such thing. So we tick mark their calls. We take what were called their call sheets at the end of the day. And part of my job as the assistant was to calculate the tick marks. Like, I'd add up all the tick marks, and then I would throw them into I don't even know if we called it Excel at the time. It was all brand new. Like this was all brand new. Computers were fairly new back then. So we were like, I'd add up all the tick marks, throw them into Billy's little spreadsheet, and then he'd look at the numbers, how many appointments were set, and then he'd try to calculate that into how many deals the salespeople had sold.
Yeah. So we dealt with that bit, and we've dealt with a little bit about your years of addiction and that. So after your kind of your experience with a gentleman in the shelter, how did this lead to getting involved with SEO and the start of your present business, InboundREM?
Well, I was running some of the largest call centers in the Western United States. There's about 7 of them, about 1,300 people. It was definitely the largest independent operation that existed on this side of the country. And by independent, I mean it wasn't like a big telecommunications company or anything like that. And so we were, when I was unofficially kind of the CMO for the company. There were people that were in charge of a lot of direct media filming stuff, and that was at the corporate office, and I was in a satellite office, but I was basically running all the things related to marketing. And I had a 3-person web development department. Those 3 people were doing 20% of our revenue, and I had 1,300 other people. So we're basically saying 3 people had about the value of 400 employees. And so when I saw that on paper, everything I've ever done, thanks to Billy, I'm looking at the numbers, I'm looking at the statistics, I'm tracking what's happening. That I already been thinking about digital and thinking, oh God, I'm in a shrinking industry. It's not as like what it was once was. It's annoying calling people on the phone. They always don't like you. Like, even customer service calls are tough where they're calling into you. So when I saw those numbers, that's what changed the game for me, John. I was just like, so I'm going to reveal something on the show that I've never really talked about. The company in question was was a corporate entity of Mantra Entertainment, but it was better known as Girls Gone Wild. And so while the founder of that company was in jail, I was running all the call centers, or at least during part of that time, I was running his call centers for him. And he was an addict in his own right, and very unstable. And I lasted longer than any other call center manager. I lasted 1.5 years. But then my time came where he called me from jail and fired me, because that's what he had done to every single other call center guy before me. So when that happened,
So you take it as a badge of honor then?
I said I lasted longer than anybody else, and he did try to rehire me, which I said no because he was nuts. But or actually, I shouldn't say that because we're publicly. I should say that he was going through a hard time and he was unstable. To be fair, so I will say that when that all happened, John, I had it in my head like I'm going to get into digital. When the time came and that call came through, I just knew, even as I was packing up my desk and walking out the building, I'm like, I'm going to get into digital. This is the time. I'm newly sober. I just got out of this really stressful job. So I sent out 300 resumes.
So
and
what time period are we talking about? When was this?
This is about 15 years ago, 16 years ago. So I sent out 300 resumes. It was like 2006 or 2007. It was right in the middle of the mortgage meltdown.
Yeah.
And so I sent out 300 resumes, and no surprise, everybody was panicked. I got no responses from my resumes, plus I had no tech experience. And then finally I changed things on my resume, which is why I decided to share it on the show. You know, it's funny because I sent out 300 resumes with Mantra Entertainment. I ran all the call centers. Nobody called me, not one call. A couple of emails back, nobody called me. I was panicked. I'd never had this hard of a time getting a job. So I changed my resume and actually revealed that it was Girls Gone Wild. And the funny thing is that the first person that actually called me was John Crabb, the founder of one of the 3 founders of Agent Image, one of the biggest developers of real estate websites that exists. And he was curious about the Girls Gone Wild thing. He was basically, did you really just apply for a tech job at my company? Like that was basically his question. And I said yes. And I got very lucky because we had this incredible conversation, which I'll never forget, that outlasted hours long. He pulled me into an interview. He had me meet the entire sales team at Agent Image. I managed to convince all of them that I was a good risk. And then they brought me on for 30 days as a project manager. And then they let me start their online sales division as a salesperson. So that's how I got my start.
Right. So I'm not obviously.
Online marketing. I did say online marketing, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah, they had a division they had never done before that was related to online marketing. So I started selling those services. I was the first person in that division to do that.
Obviously, I'm from England. I'm English.
Sure.
So I'm not aware. Obviously, you've mentioned just quickly. Obviously, we need to wrap up the podcast part of the show. We're going to continue the discussion a bit longer though. But just to finish off the podcast, obviously you've mentioned this TV show a few times, but I'm not actually aware of it because obviously, what can you give a brief outline why it's so obviously in your heart, the way you expressed it, it's a little bit notorious, this TV show.
Not a little bit. Right now, I promise you, half the people listening to this show are laughing their tuchus off.
But I'm not aware of it. I'm like,
all you got to do is Google it. But here's the premise. So, Girls Gone Wild turned teenage rambunctiousness into a national phenomenon. They would get in this bus and they'd basically drive around with this big Girls Gone Wild logo on it. And they go to spring break and places where young people congregate. And then young women would go into this bus and take off their clothes for a cameraman, and they would film it, and they create these DVDs, and then they would sell these DVDs on cable. Okay, we at the height of Girls Gone Wild, we had a $7 million per month cable budget. So I was running all the call centers that supported that. And unbeknownst to many people, we had a contract with Vivid, which was an adult entertainment producer too. So we're doing cold calls for both Girls Gone Wild and so searching under people. There's about 150 people in customer service, and everybody else was doing outbound calls, or what were called product add-on calls for other vendors, which is just where they would add Girls Gone Wild CDs onto the tail end of another offer. So we were just everywhere. I mean, we built up a massive marketing machine. Massive, which is surprising. Like that, all this is telling anybody that's listening is that you did not turn on any U.S. cable TV during like from 2004 through 2008. Like you just didn't.
I was listening to Radio 4 and had my tea, my biscuits with my tea. This sounds a little bit more outside. So basically, it was a kind of quasi, kind of soft porn kind of show, was it?
Not basically. That's what it was.
All right. Thanks for the picture. We're going to wrap up. I'm not sure if I want that picture in my mind, but there we go. So we're going to wrap up the podcast part of the show. I'm going to delve a little bit more into Robert's background. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you have, leave a comment in the YouTube channel or on the Facebook page, which you can join, and all free. Like I say, we're going to continue the discussion for about 10-15 minutes. Robert, what is the best way for people to learn more about you and what you're up to, Robert?
Well, mine is all the detail that we just covered in this interview. You can learn everything that I've shared with the world about inbound marketing and about real estate SEO on my website, InboundREM.com. If for some reason some of you want to contact me, you can do so on my About or Services pages and schedule an appointment to talk to me. If you, mainly if you're on the middle to upper end of your own market and you're looking to change your marketing, get rid of all the recurring paid services that you love to hate, Zillow, Trulia, like KV Core, Sync, the list goes on, Ylopo. If you want to take ownership, I would be a good call to start maybe researching that.
Yeah. And if you want to contact MailRight, our perfect customer fit is somebody between their 2nd to 5th year in the industry, either individual or a small power team, and you're looking for a company to build your digital presence on WordPress, and also want to help with Facebook and Google paid advertising. MailRight should be your partner. And please go over to the MailRight website and look at what me and Adam have to offer you. We'll be back next week with either we'll be discussing a subject internally between me and Robert, or we'll have an industry expert to give you more insight about how you can be more successful in 2022. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.
Bye.
So you joined this real estate website design company. You start off as one of their salespeople. What happens next? How does that progress, Robert?
So I was effectively running the online marketing division, but I never really got that proper title from Agent Image. And there's a lot that goes into that. But I was writing a lot of business, I was definitely a senior account executive. That's the title that they had granted me at that company. And I was definitely running the numbers. By the time I left, I think I was the #1 sales volume person there. But we did that for 3, 4, 5 years. And what was happening was I really wanted to grow, and they were just not in the headspace of allowing me to get out of a sales role. Like I was looking to manage, I was looking to grow a division. So then what happened is they promoted the guy that was actually running the online marketing. So there was somebody who produced the work, and I was selling the work. The guy that was running all the teams that were producing the work, Vinny LaBarbera, was he essentially first became the CEO of Agent Image for a brief amount of time, and then he left and bought the whole online marketing division from Agent Image and started another company called Inforza. And during that transition, for some reason, I didn't get brought over with him. I was being left with the Agent Image team. And so I just left entirely. I just got disheartened. And I went and was recruited by a friend of mine that was three down from the CTO at Comcast. He had just left a major corporate position. He was a big deal inside the communications industry. And I was just incredibly thrilled to get tapped by him. And I became the senior vice president of sales for what ended up being one of the only, because this was all 2007, 2008.
Yeah,
everybody
sure.
was hurting. So this independent web development agency called Cyplex ended up being one of the last agencies standing. And interestingly enough, the owner of that agency had this really incredible skill set with SEO. So we were ranking for number one for terms like LA web design, LA custom development, stuff like that. So we had hundreds of leads coming through the door. So it was a beautiful job where for a year and a half, I got to do custom development. I did e-commerce sites. I got to work with really famous people, the inventor of Guitar Hero. I built a site for James Suckling, which is like a really well-known wine guy, and did a whole bunch of really cool things with a lot of really big brands. So I learned a completely different side of web development. And then Inforza contacted me again. And I was disillusioned with how hard the work was. And I was disillusioned with some of the leadership issues that were happening at Cyplex. And so it just wasn't a good fit for me anymore. And they had moved me out of the leadership role, which was a good move for them because I wasn't ready at that time to lead a full custom web development. I'd only worked in WordPress and small development projects. This was really big stuff that were being handled by huge development teams. So I went back to Inforza. And then as the senior vice president of sales there, I did that for a few years. Then Inforza stopped focusing on real estate. And that was finally the time that I struck out on my own. That was about 2014, 2015. And I started consulting for a small handful of my clients, like former clients and other people, a dentist and some other people that I managed to acquire. And then started InboundREM right around 2017. So I did private consulting for a couple of years, high-end private consulting. And then started InboundREM.
So to finish off, why? First of all, I'm going to put a kind of question statement to you, and first of all, I'll be interested to see if you agree, and then if you've got any kind of personal insights about if you agree with the kind of question point I'm going to make to you, and that is that we're at 2022. I think anybody involved in the real estate industry can see that probably things are going to be changing in the next 6 to 12 months. There's been a great inflation of digital leads. We have seen over the past 5 to 7 years, every year the amount of digital leads that are generated have just exploded in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
But also there seems to be still a lot of confusion, need to find a kind of silver bullet solution to digital marketing when it comes to the industry, over promising, underperforming to some extent. Would you agree with those statements? And secondly, have you got any kind of ending insights of some of the factors that are causing that, Robert?
Well, those factors have always been here. There's like in the real estate space specifically. You have a career group that are really taught at a global, universal level that their job is to walk out the door and sell real estate. So they call their neighbors, their friends, and they do 100 different things. And almost all the real estate professionals I know consider learning about digital, educating themselves about leads, like kind of like going to the dentist, like something you have to do to have good teeth, which you need, but about on the same level of pain as that. And so everybody avoids deeply diving into learning anything about digital. They literally avoid it. They get educated. Top professionals sit here and hire people like Tom Ferry to give them the basics, and they pay $1,000, per session for the privilege. And the weird thing is that most of the information that you get from anybody like that is publicly available. Like, you don't need to pay for it, but they need to set the appointment with an actual coach to make themselves sit down and do the work. So when you have an industry like that, where that's universal, misinformation is easily spread, and a lack of information or lies by omission, which is what many, many, many of these providers do. And that's where you get a proliferation of low quality, no quality. Like, Facebook is a devil of a dance partner when it comes to lead generation, because you've got people that can apply 3 or 4 different things inside the lead cycle, or you have people that can just trickily get names and numbers and hand 100 of those over to somebody and say, hey, you've got 100 leads. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have 100.
It depends. It depends on what you classify a lead. The devil's in the detail, isn't it? I think in the past 3 years, where Facebook has faced challenges is because of the market conditions. It's a way of generating leads, but then you've got the price factor. But generating possible not leads, but contact information that you can put in the database and then consistently attempt to market to is achievable. But what and some people in the industry got great success initially with Facebook because of it was a new platform, was providing leads at a certain price level where other platforms probably couldn't provide it because of the market conditions. And to some extent, what has happened to Facebook, that ability reduced, but it still has a place. But so to get back to your answer, it is the kind of silver bullet and a mental attitude that a lot of people in the real estate industry would rather go and see a dentist than to really delve into digital marketing.
Right.
Would that be a good synopsis of what you just said?
Yeah. And it creates, so there's one other thing, which this fascinates me, because here's one piece of information that I've learned a lot by doing the show with you and being in business as a CEO and a founder in this space for the last 5 years. Now, I knew the founders of many of these online companies. I met them at NAR. I met them throughout the journey of my career, but I had never understood them at an intuitive level. Now, here's what I've noticed. There's so many people, like, real estate technology, especially on the marketing side, is so wide open. You get guys who walk in with really good ideas, but they have a year or two's worth of experience. Like, Easy Agent Pro was a flautist, and they worked for a company called Service Pro. They'd never done anything in real estate. They just looked at the whole industry and said, oh, there's not a lot of really great options for real estate like agents. Let's build one, with like no background or experience at all in real estate tech.
Well, so you could criticize me for that, though, couldn't you?
Sure, but that's a lot of it. Like, the guys that live here and the women that live here, the people that have been in it for a long time, are actually not the ones creating these solutions. So everybody who's a real estate tech entrepreneur is making mistakes in real time as they build up their companies without any kind of history or knowledge about the real estate industry, what real estate agents really need. So you get a lot of well-meaning offers, because Easy Agent Pro, I love those guys, just so we're clear. But they've been spending 3 years going back and re-engineering their product to make it what they now understand that the industry really needs. And so they had to go back.
You don't mind me asking, what is that?
I don't know what they're doing, but we both know what happened with Playster, who also made the same mistake in the same way, right? Playster did the same thing. They built a cheap, fast.
Can I give you my? And you
sure.
Can just because obviously we've got another maybe 5 minutes, and you will need to be off. I think when it comes to Placer, I think it was, and which is surprising in a way. I think a lot of their mistakes was driven by the way the company was financed through VC money,
Sure.
and I'm not totally against angel investment, or what is classified as bootstrap angel investment, because I'm involved. Another part of me is as an advisor to Rob Rowling, who runs something called MicroConf, which is about bootstrapping startup companies, rather than and getting some venture capital, but not going full VC route. And when it comes to Placer, I think it was the funding and the idea that you could obtain enough market share that you could get a return to the VC investors that they expected. So I consider the whole initial foundations of the company and its funding and that led to certain marketing and certain positioning of Placer in the market. So one thing led to another, which led to, this is my term, imploding, basically. And I don't know if they're ever going to be able to grow themselves out of that implosion. But that's how I visualize what happened to them.
Sure.
How would you respond to that?
I think that, yeah, they came in with a lot of money and acquired a lot of accounts, and they did so in a very short-sighted way. I saw them make the same mistake I've seen countless startups make, where they only had one objective, the acquisition of clients, without thinking through the back end of it. How are they going to support those clients, and what is the client experience going to be? And they paid a really dramatic price for that. They harmed their own reputation. That's the dramatic price for everybody listening. I think that right now what we have is we have a company that is wiser, smarter, and spent the money and the time to create something that might be cool. I don't know. Jury's still out. But I will say this: I like the direction they're going. They definitely, this time, they listened to their customers first, ignored the entire market, and said, we're going to build something cool, and we're going to try to make that work. So we got to see what the market thinks of it. They've created something unique to them, though, man. They've created a kind of like a custom toolkit where somebody can really come in and plug all the pieces into a real estate website and build what they want. The challenge I think they're going to find, this is the interesting thing, is I don't know that most real estate agents are educated enough to even know what they want. So they're going to walk in and say, oh, I can plug this. What do I need? So I think if I was to give some advice to Placer, it would be the following. You need to train up all of your sales support staff, like deeply train them up in mass classes, so that every single rep that gets on the phone with all of your real estate customers has a medium level of ability to tell these guys what they need to build and what might work for them, and understand the differences between PPC strategies, social strategies, because the average agent does not understand these things, will take any advice that they're given by somebody who is supposed to know what they're doing. And if that person is poorly educated or poorly transmits the message, you're once again going to run into a problem where you have an end consumer that feels misled. And that's going to be horrible.
Just to finish off, Rob, I actually think the situation is much, much worse than that. I think the situation is this that's always driven it. You have a agent that doesn't know much about digital marketing, but because of the economics and the way the industry is, they actually expect a provider between $10 to $50 per lead. And what they classify as a lead is actually somebody that's ready to either buy or sell a house then, right now. And for that agent to get a commission check between 6 to whatever figure, dependent on the selling price of the house, They expect somebody to provide literally a lead on a platter for between $10 and $50 per lead. And a lot of people also tell them that they would be able to do that, where they might be able to provide a lead at some point of the seller or buyer journey, but to provide a lead on a platter for between $10 and $50, that's there literally, that agent can guarantee that commission check is delusionary at best, lying or delusionary or whatever you want to terminology you want to put around it, and everybody does a dance around that reality.
Well, here's something that I think is going to help everybody, you, me, everybody in the lead generation industry. So there's been an ever increasing and more dramatic push coming in from all the major lead providers to actually simply say, fine, you want us to give you a lay down sale possibility? No problem. We'll generate the lead. We'll call the lead. We'll qualify the lead. We'll even put the lead straight into your calendar for you with all those details already provided. All you need to do is go out and close the lead. Sounds pretty good, right? But we're going to take 25 to 35% of your commission once the sale is made. That's what we're going to do. All right. So, and this is becoming more and more prevalent. I just talked to, I got very lucky and I talked to one of the biggest users of these leads in the country. He's one of the first calls that guys like that open up divisions for Op City and stuff. I think it's Rand McNally or something. Not Rand McNally. It's Rand somebody or another for Hannah something or another. They have hundreds and hundreds of agents. They're on the East Coast, and I talked to one of their CMO or something like that. Somebody CEO or Chief Operating Officer, something like that. And he explained how their model worked. I'd never heard of it before. They hand out an endless supply of leads to their team, but the broker is taking an additional 2 or 3%. So the agent ends up paying somewhere between 30 to 38% on the sale. But they're getting laydowns. They are running actual leads every time they walk out the door. So here's what I say to everybody listening to the show. You've got a choice. Do you think you can generate leads at less than 38% of your deal price? Because if the answer is no, go to Op City and go to these leads providers. And if the answer is yes, understand, of course, there's a figuring out price with John, with me, with everybody. There's a figuring out price that you've got to pay in order for you to figure out how to make your own leads good. Like, are you going to hire somebody to call them? Because that's what these big providers are doing. That's on top of the generation. And you and I and John, we don't know how many leads they're in queuing in order to send you a single call. Could be 50, could be 100. We don't know. So I'm loving the way the direction the industry is going, because it's clearly illustrating to all of the real estate agents out there what the price tag is that big companies put on all of this optimization inside the lead generation process, because there's probably an information verification process, there's a phone call, there's the generation of the lead itself, there's the web development department, the SEO department, the PPC department that's working for Trulia, Zillow, and Realtor.com. All of those things are already in place at these companies, and they're literally telling you, yeah, we think the value of that's 30% of your deal. So what do you think
we're wrapping up, but I think we might continue this next week, and because this is the crux of what the industry is facing, and this is the crux of what a lot of agents don't understand. What is the misconception between a lot of different individuals in the real estate industry around what is a lead? How do you quantify what is a lead and what isn't? And the mismatching of expectation of what I classify as a digital lead and what the average agent classifies as a lead, and what price point you should be prepared to pay, depending on how you classify a lead. Thank you for the conversation, Rob, and thanks for listening to us. We'll be back next week, folks. See you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John.
Bye.